The three best words on all of YouTube. Mock Draft Monday. That's right, a brand new iteration for the week of the NBA trade deadline. I'm extremely excited for it. If you are as well, right now, go in the comment section, comment Mock Draft Monday and the name of your favorite NBA team. I'm going to be leaving those little hearts on every single one of those comments. And then also, if you do just enjoy the overall work and everything I put into this channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more. Now listen, some picks might get traded in the next couple of days, so things are subject to change. But we're going to do a lottery simulation, the very first Tankathon lottery simulation of the 2025 NBA draft cycle here at Utility Sports. The Wizards, Jazz, and Pelicans all have a 14% chance right now at the first overall pick. Quick little disclaimer, I am recording this late on Friday night after the games played on Friday night. The reason I'm doing that is so that not only do I get the order, but then I can go through, spend the weekend working on the mock draft, putting together pieces on who I think would go where. Of course, spending so much time not only reviewing and analyzing film again, but then also kind of looking at potential fits and what teams might be looking for which prospects. Again, some of this might be subject to change with the trade deadline very quickly looming, and some draft picks will get traded, and some of these things will switch. So keep that in mind this week, but that's why I'm recording it on Monday. There might not be movement on Monday, so at least the first day or second day of this mock draft should be still a lot of fun. Without further ado, drum roll please, let's simulate the lottery. The New Orleans Pelicans move all the way up to pick number 1. The Chicago Bulls jump up 7 spots up to number 2. That'll be an interesting little section of this mock draft. The Jazz fall down 1 spot. Washington Wizards fans, sorry to say it, you guys moved down 3 spots in this mock draft despite a recent 16-game losing streak. Kind of tough for the Washington Wizards, but listen, pick 4, you can still get a very good player in this draft. It'll be interesting to see who we go with at 4 for Washington. 5, Charlotte moves down, Toronto moves down, Brooklyn moves down, Portland moves down, and the Oklahoma City Thunder via Philadelphia also moved down 1 spot because of Chicago jumping up so much. And just a reminder, picks 15 through 30 are done by reverse order of standings, essentially. So the Cavaliers, who have the best record in the NBA, with their pick being owed out to Utah, now to Phoenix after their most recent trade between the Jazz and Suns. The Suns would be picking at 30. So keep that in mind. But here is the new lottery order and the overall order. I'm going to get to work now on that mock draft, spend quite a bit of time thinking it through. You'll see me in a couple of days.
2 days later.
All right, here we are now with the official mock draft now. Of course, the NBA, since I recorded that intro, has completely changed. Luka Doncic was traded from the Dallas Mavericks to the Los Angeles Lakers. Anthony Davis now finds himself teamed up with Kyrie Irving in Dallas. Draft picks are all on the move. Everything is crazy. And if you're curious about more NBA trades, remember, I'm going to be live on the channel the entire week of the NBA trade deadline. In fact, at the time you're watching this right now, there's a very good chance I'm live on the channel. So make sure to stop in. NBA trade deadline live streams all week long leading up to the 2025 NBA trade deadline. But here we are now with the New Orleans Pelicans. First overall, the Pelicans, where will they go? Who will they take? And I think the answer at this point of the year is extremely clear. Coming into the draft cycle, I labeled Cooper Flagg as the 99.9% chance first overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft. And with the first overall pick here, the New Orleans Pelicans do in fact select Cooper Flagg to be the heir apparent of the face of the franchise role for the New Orleans Pelicans. Life post Zion Williamson, maybe. We'll see what happens at the trade deadline. Of course, there's going to be a lot of rumors, news, and speculation. But what I can tell you here is Cooper Flagg is an everything kind of piece for the Pelicans in what would be kind of a restart or maybe a retooling around a player who can do so many different things. And he's such a special prospect. You look at all the analytical models right now. He's absolutely killing it in BPM. He's been a super efficient offensive player from your traditional box score numbers, thinking about field goal percentage, his three-point percentage even, which was one of the bigger question marks about his overall early transition into both college basketball and the NBA. Well, he's shooting about 35% from 3 in college. And a lot of this is coming with him operating with the ball in his hands, being the primary initiator, creator to the Duke Blue Devils offense. I do have to give a real shout out here to John Shire, coach of the Duke Blue Devils. He has been really willing to allow Cooper Flagg the leash and the room to grow and really navigate and learn, especially early in the season. I think we've seen the benefits of that as Duke has been rolling as of late. Cooper Flagg's been playing some fantastic basketball. And when it comes to the New Orleans Pelicans, while there's a lot of questions about the future of Brandon Ingram, future of Zion Williamson, CJ McCollum, even DeJounte Murray now, who unfortunately went down with a very significant injury. I'm praying and hoping for his quick and speedy recovery. I think the questions for the New Orleans Pelicans about their long-term team building become a little bit easier to answer when you have a player like Cooper Flagg on your roster. While the Pelicans are in kind of a weird spot, Cooper Flagg you can ask to do so many different things, like I talked about with Duke, putting him on the basketball, letting him be a creator of your offense, drive and kick. That's one of the biggest areas of growth we've seen from where he was a few years ago when he was still in Maine to his tenure at Montverde Academy to what he's now been doing at the Division I level for a very, very, very good basketball program. Duke has been obviously very incredible this season, and Cooper Flagg has been the biggest driving force of that, both offensively and then defensively, when you look at what he's capable of doing. I think right now the on-ball defense does need some work, especially if you're going to ask him to guard smaller players, guard down the lineup a little bit more. I think his first step defensively, even though there's a ton of tools and traits, does need a lot of work. I think specifically his defensive balance needs some real improvement. But with that in mind, what we see on film all the time and what really I think has been his greatest asset, despite sometimes, maybe not being the best technical defender on the perimeter at all times, what he has is the makeup speed, the shot blocking timing, the recovery skills to either cut back off on drives because he's so long and athletic, or to meet guys at the rim if he does get beaten. I think when you're looking at his defensive versatility, of course, he's going to have some monumental chase down blocks in his NBA career. Of course, there's going to be some incredible weak side rotation blocks. But what he really has, and I think this is the most important thing, he has tremendous anticipatory skills as a team defender. And it's not just about, okay, well, we're going to put this guy individually out on an island and ask him to guard someone. In fact, I think the best way to win in the NBA is having a collective, strong defensive team unit. And something that New Orleans right now, even though they have some elite defenders, and including Herb Jones at the time I'm recording this, having a better team defensive construct could probably elevate the floor and ceiling of this Pelicans team long term. And I think Cooper Flagg is, of course, the crown jewel, the defining gem of the 2025 NBA draft class, in my opinion. And I think for New Orleans here, getting this pick gives them a lot of flexibility and a real build-around core-centered player who does his work on the glass, works hard on defense, has great anticipation skills, and then is growing and improving every single day offensively into what looks like a player who's going to be very, very, very good immediately upon coming into the NBA, and a player who is quickly starting to erase or cover up all of his flaws that many presumed might be problems for him early into his NBA career. Moving on now to pick number 2, I have the Chicago Bulls here, of course, after moving up 7 spots in the lottery. Who will the Chicago Bulls look to take? Now, they do have a plethora of guards. They traded for Josh Giddey. They have, of course, Kobe White. Think about Ayo Dosunmu there. The Bulls do have some solid guard play already, but I think best player available, BPA, is what you have to look at here for the Chicago Bulls. So second overall in this mock draft, I have the Bulls selecting Dylan Harper, guard out of Rutgers. And right now there's a huge conversation around Dylan Harper about what position he is. Is he a point guard? Is he a wing? Is he kind of a point forward at times? And I don't really understand where that question's coming from. He's very clearly a lead guard. He is a guard. He is a point guard. He's going to have the ball. You're going to put him in high ball screens. You're going to have him handling the rock, pushing in transition, playing out of isolation. He's going to be your standard go-to offensive player that you see all the time in the NBA. And if there's one selling point on why a team would be really happy to get pick number 2, the traditional team building model that we've seen from Detroit with Cade Cunningham, Dallas when they had Luka Doncic still, and that overall roster construction building around players who are high volume ball handlers. Dylan Harper fits that kind of description. He's got a good NBA frame. You kind of look at his frame, his body type, and some of his production numbers. You compare that to Arizona State's James Harden, you get a pretty comparable player. Now, I don't think Dylan Harper has quite the shot-making talent that James Harden did coming out. The free throw rate's also down quite a bit, but his free throw rate's still really high overall. But compared to Harden's free throw rate, it is down. I think that is kind of a testament to the difference in the quick first step between these two guys. But overall, I still think Dylan Harper is a very intriguing prospect. He can weaponize the weak side and strong side of the floor. With Cooper Flagg, I talked about the importance of team defense. When you have a talented offensive player like Dylan Harper, they know how to find the weak spots in those team defenses. What are you game planning for? What spots on the floor can I get to manipulate where your defensive coverage is going to be so that I can either swing the ball to the opposite side corner and get into wide open corner three, or force you into closeouts and rotations. And then from there, we're going to get good offense. And I think Dylan Harper is going to be an initiator of good offense in the NBA, which is what justifies him being a top 2 or 3 pick in the 2025 NBA draft. Ultimately, I do expect him to go off the board second overall, 1 pick behind Cooper Flagg in the 2025 NBA draft. On to pick number 3, the Utah Jazz here now. Of course, a team that I think is very fascinating to watch both at the NBA trade deadline and going forward with their team building. They have a collection of young players. They're giving a lot of run to Keontae George, Isaiah Collier, Bryce Sensabaugh is playing a lot. Of course, Walker Kessler's been pretty good again this season, which I'm happy to see. They have Cody Williams. There's so many young pieces on this roster, and they do have some established veterans as well, but they're going to continue looking for more premium top-end talent. I think that's one thing the Jazz are still kind of lacking at this point. They have yet to get a top 5 pick even since trading both Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. Now I think this is their prime opportunity to start adding that talent to their treasure trove of current existing players and also draft picks. And I think third overall here, I have the Utah Jazz going with forward Ace Bailey from Rutgers. The wing forward hybrid is very polarizing in the 2025 NBA draft class. And I understand why. There's a lot of concerns. From a film perspective, he plays really skinny with the basketball. What I mean by that is his functional strength is not very good when he gets walled up by defenders. He oftentimes picks the ball up, doesn't trust his handle, and also kind of loses his positioning on the court. He's very prone to kind of getting skinny against double teams. But then there's also a ton of positives. You look at his burst out of a triple threat. You look at the pure shot making over contest specifically. And if you look at his overall shot profile this year, even though when you can watch games and be like, oh my gosh, that's a bad shot. Oh my goodness, that's not a good shot. And a lot of those things can be turnoffs, and I totally understand that perspective. The overall body of work this year at Rutgers still screams elite shot maker. And at the end of the day, in the NBA, talent typically reigns supreme. And Ace Bailey has a ton of talent as a shot maker specifically. His shooting splits are all very good this year. Besides his free throw percentage, that might be a concentration focus thing, which, first of all, that is a little bit of a concern, but I do think going forward in his NBA career, that's an area where he could definitely improve and grow just from maturing and getting a little bit older, and also just, again, better putting forth focus, concentration into that area of his game. And then I think when it comes to, the playmaking field, that's obviously a problem, but we've seen him be a player who's exercised his impact and athletic traits in other ways. He's been an awesome rebounder this year for Rutgers, something I don't think gets talked about enough in his prospect profile around social media and around other people covering the NBA draft. I just think that's an important trait, and it's an important tool for forwards and wings. Guys who rebound the ball really, really well separate themselves from the Jeremy Grants of the world. It's just a different kind of player. And then you look at also the stocks component. He's averaging 2.5 stocks per game this season, something, again, that's getting kind of overlooked. His athletic tools do show up on film, defensively, on the glass, and I think there's a lot of optimism that with the right coaching staff and the right, collection of talent around him, this could be a real building block for an organization. Now, I do think there are some serious risks taking this kind of player because of some of the potential downsides, the potential pitfalls as a playmaker. His passing vision is just horrendous. But there's been strides as well throughout the year. So I don't think he's a finished product by any stretch of the imagination. I do believe Will Hardy is a good coach. Now, he's got so much young talent to work with there that it's hard to kind of rein all that young talent in and make them winning players early in their careers. That's going to be the real next step for the Utah Jazz. But I think Ace Bailey is a tremendous get here for them from just a sheer talent perspective in the 2025 NBA draft. Now on to pick number 4, the Washington Wizards, and I ran into a real crossroads here trying to project this selection. The Wizards obviously moving down in this mock draft despite being the worst team in the NBA right now by record. Pick 4 kind of gets tricky for them with Cooper Flagg off the board, who I think would be a tremendous fit, or Dylan Harper, who's I think a pretty seamless fit as well as an offensive go-to player. The Wizards now are kind of faced with the question of, do we go with a real offensive initiator? And that kind of hinges on their bet on Keyshawn George and Bub Carrington, who they both drafted in the first round last year. Do they believe Bub Carrington can be your go-to offensive player? Or do you feel like you need someone who can possibly supersede him and be a better version of that as an initiator, creator of your offense? And I think that is a very real possibility. Or do you continue to try and build your defense and athletic profile up? Obviously, Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly have those kinds of traits, and I think someone like VJ Edgecombe can maybe fit into that criteria as well here for the Washington Wizards. 4th overall from an athleticism, potential, defensive acumen standpoint. Ultimately, 4th overall in this mock draft, I have the Washington Wizards selecting guard Kasparas Jakucionis out of Illinois, and I'm kind of split on the fit here. So I obviously, as you guys can tell, I went back and forth all weekend long here thinking about Jakucionis to Washington, thinking about VJ Edgecombe to the Wizards. Which one makes more sense? Well, I think Edgecombe is seriously a real possibility here. Honestly, this is a very, very tight battle here. Jakucionis, his overall impact on the game right now has been really, really strong for Illinois all season. He has been such a high-volume ball handler, decision maker for them. He obviously runs so many high ball screens. I think his game, in a lot of ways, is tailor-made for the NBA in terms of the style of play and the change of direction tools and the kind of play at your own pace that he has in his game, where not only can he get a defender off balance by kind of shifting gears, but also getting to spots on the floor and then being creative with his footwork, playing out of stride stops, getting up and unders, initiating contact, drawing fouls, getting to the line. Those are all the positives, and it's showing up in the overall box score with him averaging 16, 5, and 5 roughly. He's been an awesome, impactful player this year for Illinois, and in a lot of ways a winning player who does a lot of his work early, whether it's trying to set up an action to get the ball off of a kind of a trigger action. He does a lot of really nice things, but I do think the fit here in Washington is kind of tricky. The athletic profile doesn't project to be very, very good in the NBA. In fact, that's one of the biggest concerns right now around Jakucionis, in my opinion, is athletically, is he quick enough to just flat out beat people in isolation offensively? And then defensively, can he actually really hold up and hold his own? Right now, he's not generating a ton of stocks per game, despite being a very high IQ player. He's not really a super impactful defender at the college level. How does that translate to the NBA? And then I also think about Washington from just a sheer fit perspective with the other talent currently on the roster. Alex Sarr is a skinnier, not prototypical screen and roll, screen and dive big man. And while Jakucionis has had a lot of success playing with Tomislav Ivicic, who is an awesome pick and pop big man, I think it's just kind of a weird fit if Washington doesn't have a big bruising center who can set good screens, or at least set good screens and pop out of it. And I think Alex Sarr kind of finds himself in the mix, a little bit of a tweener between a 4 and 5. And I've talked about this, at length during the 2024 NBA draft cycle. There's a lot of things to love about Alex Sarr, but there's also a lot of concerns about if you're drafting a high volume pick and roll ball handler, how does that fit really with someone like Alex Sarr? That's why the fit for Cooper Flagg, I think, just makes a ton more sense for Washington. Obviously, if they have the first overall pick, that's where they'll go. But Jakucionis, even though the talent's there, the shot making display is sometimes unbelievably impressive, there are some concerns here as well, and I really am kind of split at this point on where Washington would go 4th overall, but in this mock draft, I did ultimately settle on Jakucionis to the Wizards at pick number 4. Pick number 5, the Charlotte Hornets here now. Of course, kind of another tough season for them. We'll see how the trade deadline materializes. Obviously, ownership was very active last year, traded both Terry Rozier, PJ Washington away. We'll see what they have up their sleeve this season as well. They've already traded Nick Richards, so maybe the Hornets will be active once again. We'll have to keep our eyes on them. But 5th overall, I think it's clear here the Charlotte Hornets select guard VJ Edgecombe from Baylor, and I don't know if there's a real better fit for them at this spot in the draft, 5th overall. Getting VJ Edgecombe, not only are you kind of banking on that super long-term high upside with all the athletic tools and some really impressive flashes throughout the course of the season, whether that be splitting double teams off of high ball screens, or some of you think his weak side defensive rotations. I've talked at length in other mock drafts and other recruiting video or other draft videos in the past about VJ Edgecombe being someone who just all of a sudden you blink and he makes a rotation you thought wasn't even humanly possible. He's that quick, he's that athletic, he's a leaper, a true leaper. And what I mean by that is he generates so much force off the ground, specifically with his ankles, in a way where he doesn't have to have a huge load up to be springy. And it's such an impressive thing when you actually watch him, because there's times where if he jumps after the guy if he jumps after the guy he's guarding, he still might beat that player to the summit, beat him to the apex of the jump. And I think Edgecombe specifically, obviously we've seen the results of some of those athletic moments where it's whether a huge dunk against Gonzaga, or some crazy chase down blocks, or a crazy rotation block, impressive steals, and of course just downhill burst as well. Those things all pop, and that's what points to the potential. But I think there's also an area of his game that I really just love from an actual coaching perspective that I think, helps the position, or the possession battle, a ton. And it's his effort, it's his want to. And I think we see that a ton. Again, there's so many players who have elite athletic traits and don't always utilize them or practically apply them into the game of basketball all the time. And I think Edgecombe kind of intersects between a player with all these athletic gifts and the actual tools to be a potential player, while also maintaining kind of a high floor because of his impact on the game in other areas, whether that be rebounding, the weak side help defense, being kind of a gap filler for your team in a variety of ways, getting on loose basketballs, chasing down long rebounds, being a transition offensive weapon. Edgecombe just does a little bit of everything. And I think if you're looking for a player who can fit around LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Edgecombe kind of applies perfectly into this roster for what they're needing as kind of another player in that backcourt, and someone who's maybe got a little bit more grit, toughness, and athletic tools to work with than what LaMelo and Brandon Miller presently offer to Charlotte to begin with. Moving on to pick number 6, the Toronto Raptors here now. A team that obviously has not had the season I think they're looking for, but there is a lot of talent here. Of course, Scotty Barnes. Now, they've been also rumored for Brandon Ingram. Again, if you're looking for trade deadline news, come join me on the channel right now. I'll be probably live the moment you're watching this. The Toronto Raptors, 6th overall here, though, I have them selecting guard Trey Johnson from Texas. And I think with the way the modern NBA is played, the importance of three-point volume, the importance of shot making specifically, Trey Johnson should remain a clear headliner in the 2025 NBA draft. And while there are going to be some critics, there are going to be some skeptics, there are going to be some concerns about how exactly he fits long-term in the NBA, because people are going to question his rim volume, people are going to question his shot diet, people are going to question his free throw rate. Can he actually be a go-to offensive player because of those things? I think for Trey Johnson specifically, not only has his overall efficiency held up throughout the course of the year as an elite shot maker, something that I wanted to see last and span throughout the course of the NBA or the college season, that has exactly spanned. It's been tremendous. And if you think about his translation into the NBA, and at times I've been a culprit of this too. I've been a victim of this, honestly, where I look at rim pressure, I look at paint touches, I look at, okay, can you beat your guy off the dribble and get to the rack, get easy baskets for yourself, get to the free throw line. Those things are all very important. That's something like Kasparas Jakucionis, who kind of controls his pace a little bit better, can get the defenders off balance a bit, and score out of those situations. He does that better than Trey Johnson. But what Trey Johnson does better is shoot pull-up jump shots, shoot pull-up threes. And you might say, well, okay, is that great? Like pull-up twos, pull-up threes? My question for you is, what's the most common 1-5 or 2-5, you're talking about a center screening, pick and roll defense right now? If your center is guarding in the pick and roll, in the NBA, probably 8 times out of 10, he's in drop coverage. What kind of shots does that allow? A lot of pull-ups. And Trey Johnson's game is catered to taking and making pull-up shots, whether those be threes or twos. Now, I do think, adjusting to the NBA speed, the NBA game, the NBA three-point line might take a little bit of time for Trey Johnson. I'm still overly optimistic the fact that he's got a shot diet that really is going to work well in the NBA and pair with what NBA coaches want him shooting. You watch the Houston Rockets right now. You watch some of the better teams in the NBA. Their guards, their lead ball handlers, primary initiators of offense, typically all lean into shooting a lot of pull-up shots. And Trey Johnson's going to do that, and I think for Toronto, this can be a real core build-around piece who maybe fits next to Emmanuel quickly in the backcourt there, while also giving them some scoring dynamism around Scotty Barnes in the half-court as well. Pick number 7, unfortunately for the Brooklyn Nets, they fall a little bit in this mock draft, of course, with the lottery simulation, but the Nets are very well poised to make some noise this year at the draft. They have not held a lottery pick since moving to Brooklyn, which is insane. But here they are now with an opportunity to add a lottery level talent. 7th overall at the Brooklyn Nets, selecting center Derik Queen from Maryland. And I think fit is the key theme of this video here, this mock draft this week. Derik Queen, I think, is a brilliant fit into the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously, right now, there's a lot of question marks about that long-term roster, and you might be saying, well, they already have Nick Claxton. We'll see what happens at the trade deadline with Nick Claxton. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he will be staying there forever. And I also think for Brooklyn, you specifically look at their play styles this year. As a screen and roll man, Nick Claxton's numbers are down. You look at his opportunities on cuts. Those numbers are all down. As a result, some of Nick Claxton's overall efficiency from the field and his effectiveness as a half-court scorer have plummeted in a lot of ways. And you might be saying, well, okay, why are the Nets doing that then? Why are the Nets playing a different style that doesn't fit into Nick Claxton? Well, it's because they have a coach in Jordi Fernandez who came from the Mike Brown coaching tree, who ran a lot of zoom action. And guess what? The Kings went from averaging 9 handoffs per game last year to over 14 handoffs per game. And that might not sound like a drastic difference, 5 possessions per game. It's a lot. That's a huge substantive growth. And for someone like Derik Queen, who's already flashed so many ball handling skills, has flashed some mid-range shot-making ability. Now, he hasn't been able to effectively stretch that out to the college three-point line yet, but I think there's a serious amount of optimism that he can become a legitimate stretch big in the NBA. And I think for Brooklyn, not only could they possibly look at trading Nick Claxton, but Derik Queen's ability to handle the basketball, win in isolation against other big men, dribble the ball, make plays, he's comfortable walking the ball up the court. I think that all fits really, really well into what Jordi Fernandez and the Brooklyn Nets should be looking for their offense specifically. You think about the Kings and the success they've had historically since trading for Domantas Sabonis, with him pushing the ball up the court, making reads in early transition, triggering into dribble handoffs. Derik Queen is going to do all of those things, I think, really, really well pretty quickly into his NBA career. Now, he won't do them as well as Domantas Sabonis probably, but I think 7th overall here for Brooklyn. This is a home run, slam dunk pick for the Brooklyn Nets that not only fits their team, but he's also a really young prospect who has very significant upside and perhaps can become one of the better stretch bigs with the ability to attack closeouts, drive off the perimeter, and make plays with a live handle, and flashing some playmaking skill as well. I just think Derik Queen for Brooklyn here, 7th overall, is an awesome, awesome, awesome pick for the Nets in this mock draft. Pick number 8, the Portland Trailblazers. And the Blazers have been a team I've struggled to mock draft for this year a little bit, especially with some of the areas in the draft where they've been picking. You know, I've looked at guys like VJ Edgecombe when he, maybe a little bit earlier in the process after he had a tremendous January, of course. Now VJ Edgecombe goes a little bit higher in this mock draft. There's some players who I've considered. Obviously, after drafting Donovan Clingan, I don't see them going with someone like Khaman Maluach. So it kind of opens the door here to getting creative, and I think I've landed on something I actually really do like. And the more I think about it, the more time over this weekend after getting these lottery simulation and starting to play with some of this mock draft and figuring out where I'm going to slot each prospect, this pick I started to fall in love with a little bit. For Portland here, I think one of the biggest things that they need is more size, rebounding, defensive switchability, defensive versatility. And again, I think length, athleticism, and size at times can be king in the NBA. The Blazers are getting that here 8th overall. I have them selecting forward Asa Newell from Georgia, and I think this is such an intriguing prospect. He's been absolutely brilliant as a play finisher around the rim this season. He's shooting well over 60% on 2-pointers. Now, the 3-point shot volume isn't huge yet, and also the 3-point success rate isn't huge yet. He's kind of a little bit of a tweener right now in the college game as a 4-5 in college, and that makes him a little bit easier to project as just a pure 4 in the NBA. If you're kind of a hybrid 4-5 in college, you're probably going to have to be playing power forward because you're not good enough to probably protect the rim at all times and be a true center in the NBA. But what I do think is the Blazers, in moments when Donovan Clingan's off the court, we'll see what happens with Ayton's contract, and we'll see what happens with Robert Williams as well. But Asa Newell can maybe be your small ball 5 and have success as a high volume pick and roll man. His athletic traits are obviously through the roof. And then I think specifically, if you're looking at some of the deficiencies for the Portland Trailblazers presently, Jeremy Grant is one of the worst rebounding power forwards in the history of the NBA. Getting someone who actually has impact in other ways than just shooting the ball and scoring, and this is where I think a lot of fans kind of miss the boat with Jeremy Grant. They see the fact that he scores a lot of points. They see the fact that he scores on decent efficiencies. And they might say, why is this guy not a great player? Why is this guy not super valuable? But then you watch and you say, okay, well, the defense kind of comes and goes. The rebounding is pretty awful for his position. He doesn't really help you win the possession battle a ton. He just kind of doesn't bring that impact. And I think Asa Newell might be the exact opposite here, where the box score numbers, the traditional stats in the NBA probably will never completely wow you. But the impact, the winning plays, the extra efforts, the second chance opportunities he can generate for you as an offensive rebounder, as a defensive rebounder, kick and go guy, there's a lot of things and tools that Ace and Newell are going to bring to the game that impact winning in a way that just honestly Portland does not have right now on their current roster, which is why I've really started to fall in love with this pick quite a bit if the Blazers are around pick 8. Pick number 9, the Oklahoma City Thunder here. How unfair is it, by the way, that there's a real legitimate chance that the Thunder are picking in the top 10 in this year's draft? It's absolutely insane. But nonetheless, here they are, 9th overall. Via the Philadelphia 76ers, at this spot, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder selecting center Khaman Maluach, and this was a hard pick for me to mock. I don't know if Maluach is a perfect fit into the way Oklahoma City wants to play. Obviously, they have Chet Holmgren, they have Isaiah Hartenstein already on their roster. So I think for OKC specifically, you look at their team, this isn't necessarily a huge drastic need either after they addressed it in free agency by signing Hartenstein, but as the season has kind of played out, we've seen injuries, both for Hartenstein and Holmgren, prevent the two of them really sharing the court together. And I think integrating a third big man here in Khaman Maluach, someone who has elite touch, he's shooting almost 80% from the floor. And right now there's kind of a narrative going around that he's not been super productive. I completely disagree with that. He's playing just 20 minutes per game right now for Duke. But if you look at his per 40 minutes numbers, which is, I think, the best way to evaluate a prospect because you get rate stats, you get kind of an understanding of, okay, if everyone played 40 minutes, how productive have they been? In those per 40 minutes, he's averaging over 16 points, 12 rebounds, and over 2 blocks a game. That's impressive stuff from Khaman Maluach, especially, I think coming into the year, the question was, how raw is he? You know, I've watched a lot of his basketball African League tape. I've seen him play. I have relationships with scouts over there, people who have been involved with basketball African League teams. They all ooh and ah over this kid and how quickly he's progressed, how much better he's gotten year after year after year of working with him. And I honestly think the sky's kind of the ceiling here for him. He's a player who, you know, typically I don't sit here and ooh and ah myself over guys with quote-unquote super high potential. I really like functional basketball tools, but that's what really intrigues me about Khaman Maluach. You know, there's upside maybe as him being a passer with a live dribble. There's upside maybe perceived of him stepping out to the three-point line a bit and being a stretch big in some capacity. I don't really care about a lot of those things. What I know is he's huge. He protects the rim. He's got very good lateral mobility skills for his size. He's impactful on the glass. He's impactful defensively as a shot blocker and an intimidator around the rim. He's going to deter guys from shooting at the rack. And he's an awesome lob threat and roll man. He has very good hands. He can catch the ball above the rim, below the rim, can catch the ball at his waist. And again, he's got very good touch. He plays within himself. He plays within the team context. He's been okay sacrificing touches, post touches. And I think, you know, you think about a lot of the dominant college basketball players, the way Zach Edey, Hunter Dickinson dominate college basketball over the last few years. It's get on the block, feed me the ball, maybe run some type of action off of my catch, and I'm going to go to work one-on-one. Maluach doesn't play that way. He plays a very modern style of center game. And that's a credit to, again, John Shire. It's a credit to Duke having a good kind of foundation and flow for him to best succeed long-term in his NBA career. And I think for OKC specifically, while it's a little bit different than what they have right now in Holmgren and Hartenstein, it's just a pure talent grab. This guy's huge. He protects the rim, and he can fit off of your other talent by putting him in the weak side dunker spot and just letting him eat off of lobs, dump-offs. And by the way, if you want Shea to get into more ball screen action, if you want to run 4-5 action, which I think could be really unique, you could definitely do so with Holmgren handling the ball and Maluach setting screens. And I also think maybe even Hartenstein, with how good of a passer he is, maybe you could play the two of them together, which would be really, really unique. I think the more size you can have in the Western Conference, the better to throw at Nikola Jokic for potential playoff series. Of course, Dallas just got bigger with Anthony Davis and their collection of front court pieces. The more definitely fits that bill here for the OKC Thunder at pick number 9. Pick number 10, the San Antonio Spurs here. Now this pick comes from the Atlanta Hawks. The Spurs actually have the 10th and 11th pick in this mock draft. 10th overall here, I have the Atlanta Hawks selecting guard Boogie Fland from Arkansas. And while his shooting numbers have taken a little bit of a dip, again, I think this is one where when we look at the actual shot creation and the shot profile and the ball handling capabilities, he becomes a very unique, interesting prospect. Now, I think very interestingly to note, the Spurs had pick number 8 last year. They traded it out for future picks from the Minnesota Timberwolves. That player was Rob Dillingham, ultimately, that the Spurs passed on drafting. Dillingham, listen, he's a Coach Calipari type of player, talented guard who can create on the ball, and he's rather slight, light. Well, guess what? Boogie Fland playing for Coach Calipari here in Arkansas. Could the Spurs kind of have something against either this archetype, what they want to build long term? I think Boogie Fland, kind of an early player comp for him, for me, is Jordan Clarkson with a little bit better playmaking feel, especially when you look at Jordan Clarkson in his first kind of introduction as a young player in the NBA. He was not really looking to initiate. I think that's something he's grown as a player, especially as he's become more of a veteran and I think matured his game quite a bit. His playmaking has taken leaps and bounds steps forward. Boogie Fland has better natural instinct skills as a playmaker, and with his overall shot profile where he's going to shoot a bit at the get a bit to the line, he shoots a bit at the rim, shoots a decent amount off of pull-ups like we talked about earlier with Trey Johnson as well. This is the type of player where he has some outside scoring gravity. Teams are going to feel a little bit of pressure when he's coming off of a screen from Victor Wembanyama that he's going to look to score the ball. But again, he's got that creativity as a passer to either utilize cutters, find the weak side of the court. Now he's a little bit smaller, so he's not going to see over the top of the defense like a jumbo playmaker does, someone who's like 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", but he's not a tiny player either. He's not quite as small as Rob Dillingham, of course. So I think this isn't a non-starter for the Spurs. I think that they could strongly consider this kind of player. And who knows, maybe they don't even have this pick. We'll see what happens in the De'Aaron Fox sweepstakes. But nonetheless, the Spurs here, Boogie Fland, I think is a player that does make just flat out a ton of sense from a scoring, playmaking, hybrid standpoint, fitting around their other core talent. And with pick number 11, they have the chance here as well. After taking Boogie Fland from that pick from the Hawks, the Spurs here at number 11 go with forward Noah Essengue from Ulm. There was very much a lot of noise last year centered around Tidjane Salahin and the Spurs' significant interest in him at pick 8. Now, of course, Charlotte ultimately drafted him 6th overall, which I think maybe is what motivated the Spurs to trade out of pick number 8. And I think you're getting the better version of Tidjane Salahin in a lot of ways here now. Noah Essengue, better shooter of the basketball, better cutter off the ball, someone who I think has been a lot more productive and really reliable for Ulm in a lot of ways. Now, there's been moments where Ulm has had some huge defeats, and I think part of that is youth, leaning into Noah Essengue and Ben Seraph in a lot of different ways. But I still think Essengue here, if you look at what San Antonio was quote-unquote rumored to be looking at last draft in a player who is kind of your typical lengthy, long, athletic forward, Essengue can be that. He's caught a ton of lobs this year for Ulm off of Ben Seraph passes. He operates off the baseline really well. And I think if you're looking long-term at San Antonio, if they do walk out of this draft with Boogie Fland and Noah Essengue, you can really easily envision Boogie Fland handling the ball at the top of the key, high pick and roll, Wembanyama, kind of short rolling off of it, trying to catch it around 12 to 18 feet, trying to make a play downhill, and Essengue being a natural cutter out of the corner and being someone who can be a vertical lob threat. You have a 7'5" guy throwing the ball up in the air to another lengthy athletic forward who can catch above the rim, flush it down, can also finish below the rim a bit. There's some tools there to work with. Now, there are some flaws as well. I've talked about them at length with Essengue. I look at him just almost purely as a play finisher. I don't think there's a lot of play creation upside here. His free throw rate's not been absolutely terrible this season either. So, a lot of people like to look at free throw rate for upside. I think that is sometimes applicable, but he's not creating a ton for himself. A lot of it is opportunistic, which I think is a good thing. If you find someone who's a good, natural, instinctive cutter, that can work really, really well around top-end talent. The Spurs already have that top-end talent with Wembanyama. Essengue's got a lot of tools, but then there's also, he's not the strongest athlete. He's going to have to get a lot stronger. He's going to have to put on weight when he comes into the league to really handle being a front court piece for a team hoping to make playoff runs sooner rather than later at some point. I think San Antonio, it's an interesting spot here. Trading pick 10 and 11, if they either have them sell the draft, makes some sense to me as well, looking for a win-now upgrade. But walking away with Boogie Fland, Noah Essengue is not a terrible start in the 2025 draft by any means either. Pick number 12, the Golden State Warriors here now. Of course, kind of in a weird season. They started out so hot, since then have cooled off significantly. They've really struggled in fourth quarters as well when they're down as well. I'm sure you guys saw the Steph Curry quote about that. He couldn't believe it. It's honestly an insane statistic, and I think for the Warriors here specifically, it's talent acquisition, and it's also players who fit into Coach Kerr's system, and I think that's one of the hardest things to figure out here for Golden State. If you remember back a few drafts ago, I just absolutely loved the Trayce Jackson-Davis fit for Golden State. I think he's fit in pretty well there for the Warriors. Early in his NBA career, I don't think that's at all surprising. I kind of labeled Brandon Podziemski as a dribble pass shoot guy who could fit anywhere, and Golden State was one of those teams that I had highlighted a few times as well for him that I really, really liked. The Warriors had their system's just so unique compared to a lot of other NBA teams, and I think with that in mind, you need to find kind of players who can thrive and succeed and excel in that kind of system. And for me, 12th overall, it was forward Liam McNeeley here for UConn. Not only did I have the prerogative of finding someone who I thought could fit into the system, I was also looking for someone who had functional capabilities of playing a bigger role in the lineup, and not just bigger in terms of minutes and touches. I'm talking about bigger in terms of providing size, length, defensive acumen, rebounding ability. And I think Liam McNeeley, one of the things that's really impressed me the most about his early tenure at UConn specifically has been his impact on the glass, his ability and willingness to get involved, get on the dirty work, and make some stuff happen in that way. And then obviously from a skill set standpoint, going back to his high school days playing with Cooper Flagg at Montverde Academy, he's a floor stretcher. He was a zone beater for them. For Montverde, he was a guy who is going to stand still, knock down a lot of catch and shoot threes, has movement skills, knows how to work off of curls, off of off-ball actions and off-ball screens. Liam McNeeley, he's not going to be this incredible offensive go-to player all the time, but he's going to be an infrastructural piece that helps the Warriors in a lot of different ways by being someone who gets active on the defensive glass, can crash out of the corner offensively. He can be your stationary standstill guy standing over there and either occupying the weak side defender or strong side defender, or if you leave him open, he's going to catch and fire. And with his size, tools, and athletic traits, there's a lot to work with here. His free throw rate's actually quite a bit better than I think a lot of people are expecting. The BPM looks pretty solid early in his NBA career, or in his college career, and even though it's been kind of a little bit of a bumpy road this year for UConn in some ways, the Maui Invitational Tournament I think is a great point to that. Liam McNeeley's been, I think, still pretty good. Now, he dealt with an injury just very recently, but it doesn't look like it's going to be serious at all. The Huskies expect him to be A-okay. So that's great news, and I think for Golden State here, Liam McNeeley is going to be an awesome pickup for them, 12th overall. Number 13, the Atlanta Hawks here now. This pick comes from the Sacramento Kings. Now, this is an important, very important note to make. This pick is top 12 protected. So this was on the very border of actually conveying to the Atlanta Hawks. One pick earlier, and it's Sacramento we're talking about here. And who knows, maybe a trade with San Antonio for De'Aaron Fox could net pick 10 and 11 as well. It'll be interesting to watch the Kings draft positioning this year. It will be very, very important because a trade of De'Aaron Fox might help them keep this pick. We'll see. But in this mock, Atlanta's picking 13th, and I have them selecting guard Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma. The last time Atlanta decided to draft an Oklahoma guard, well, it's worked out pretty well. They have their foundational cornerstone piece in Trae Young, and now they're looking to supplement that. Now, there's a lot of questions for Atlanta at the trade deadline as well. Again, I'm live on the channel right now probably. Make sure to come stop in and say hi. Let's talk some NBA trade deadline stuff. But nonetheless, the Hawks here, going with Jeremiah Fears, they're looking for more offensive creation. They have Vit Krejci. They have Dyson Daniels. Those are two other players who have been playing high backcourt minutes this season for the Hawks behind Trae Young or with Trae Young in a lot of ways. The Hawks still, though, very clearly rely on Trae Young to do a little bit of everything for them offensively in terms of the creation department. And I think they're honestly over-indexed on him. And I think there's a lot of fans, like the fact that Trae Young didn't make the All-Star game. There's coaches, there's media members who don't really understand the burden that Trae Young has to carry for this team. While his efficiencies are all down, you look at the way that he actually gets defended. He gets blitzed a ton. He gets pressured way out beyond the three-point line. Obviously, his range is a testament to that. The average shot distance he takes, I think, probably pulls down his overall three-point efficiency as well. But Atlanta needs another guy who's capable of not only creating and initiating offense, but handling the basketball and being a go-to guy as a scorer. And I think, the DeJounte Murray thing didn't work out well. I think if you draft a young player and kind of help him mature his game into the fit you want it to be, around Trae Young, that's maybe an area where you're going to have some opportunity. I think especially the Oklahoma thing here maybe even helps out a little bit with the off-court, on-court relationship between Jeremiah Fears and Trae Young. Now, again, you don't only draft a player because of where he's from. It just happened to kind of coincide in this mock draft. But I think Jeremiah Fears, There are some concerns for me. If he's going to be a high volume ball handler, he needs to be a better shooter. He's shooting about 28% from 3 this year in college. That's just not going to get it done in the NBA, which is why I'm a little bit lower on Fears myself than other people at this point in time. A lot of people were kind of floating around top 5 discussions. I just never really understood that myself. I think kind of fringe back into the lottery is where we're going to see a more realistic outcome for Jeremiah Fears this draft, but and that's if he actually does come out, which I think waiting for the 2026 draft could be really sensible for him too in a lot of ways. I probably won't do that though. But the Hawks here at 13th overall, I think this is a pick that makes sense. They need more offensive creation. Now again, how does he fit long-term with Trae Young, who doesn't like to do a lot of stuff off the ball? That's going to be a red flag too though. So I think the Hawks have a tricky question to answer here of how do they kind of siphon all the ball handling responsibilities away from Trae Young without jeopardizing Trae Young's best trait and skill, which is playing with the ball in his hands all of the time. Very tricky discussion. The Dallas Mavericks, my favorite team. What a crazy weekend it's been. They traded Luka Doncic, and my world just about fell apart. If you were there for my Saturday night super late live stream, shout out to you. Appreciate you guys. But the Dallas Mavericks, 14th overall, after trading Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis. You look at their current front court, the way that it stands right now at the time I'm recording this, with Derik Lively, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, Anthony Davis. They still have Najee Marshall. They have Klay Thompson. It looks like the 3 through 5 positions are pretty well stocked and loaded. Now, it's possible the Mavericks, with their 3 tradable first-round picks and one of those salaries, could maybe go out and try and rebalance their team a little bit and look for a guard. I don't know if that's actually going to come to fruition or not, though, at this point in time. So 14th overall, I have the Dallas Mavericks selecting Egor Demin from BYU, a player who there are a lot of areas of his game that I do think need some refinement and some real improvement for him to become a good NBA player. But a lot of the tools are here. He's a jumbo playmaker with a very, very strong combination of passing vision, passing skill, and of course height and size. And I think those things are all very important. Now, in some ways, I think his height and size maybe are at times counterintuitive to his game. I think the leverage battle is really, really hard for Egor Demin to win on ball against quicker, smaller defenders. And what I mean by the leverage battle is specifically getting his center of balance low to the ground, dropping his shoulders, and trying to get his shoulders below his defender's shoulders. If you watch some of the best players in all of basketball, when they drive and when they find success driving the ball, they get lower to the ground. They're able to functionally play through contact, something Egor Demin does not do at all right now. Egor Demin's actually very, very bad against contact, and in fact shies away from it a ton. I think it's fixable. I do. I just think it takes a very detailed oriented coach who's going to look at that and say, the reason you aren't good in traffic, the reason you're not good right now going into the body of a defender is because you're playing too upright, you're playing a little too skinny, you're playing a little weak. And while, first of all, he has to get stronger, that's going to be a weight training, that's going to be a weight room thing. There's also a lot of areas of his game just from a technical standpoint of, getting his hips bent a little bit more, trying to bend his knees a little bit more. Some of those, sports science areas where you're going to have analytics for all of these types of things, and hopefully the coaching staff can get through to him and kind of shift his game a little bit, add a little bit more bend into his drives. And it's honestly like a pass rusher a lot. You think about some of the best speed pass rushers in the NFL, the bend is sometimes overwhelming for a 6'7" left tackle who can't get that low. And I think Egor Demin honestly is like that 6'7" left tackle. Sometimes his bend just isn't good enough. He can't get low enough to the ground to win that leverage battle. And I think for Dallas specifically, first of all, if you're trying to fill the void of Luka Doncic, which is maybe what this pick's trying to do a little bit, first of all, you're not going to be successful. But then secondly, Egor Demin's got a long ways to go to be that kind of guy. There's a lot of really attractive tools from a dribble pass shoot perspective. He draws a lot of attention out on the perimeter. He is a dangerous three-point shot maker. The actual three-point success rate, the three-point percentage this year doesn't necessarily indicate that. But I think with the difficulty of shots and some of the flaws in his current game, I think overall with the right development and coaching, there are a lot of tools that you can really siphon out of this guy and turn him into an awesome NBA player if things go right. And again, that's a very huge if right now because of some of the concerns I have about contact balance, playing in traffic, free throw rate, all of those kinds of things. But there's a lot of tools to work with, and I'm very excited to see if Egor Demin can really unlock his potential or not in the NBA. Pick number 15, the Orlando Magic here now. One pick outside of the lottery. I think Orlando's in a very fascinating spot. They've struggled, of course, since Paolo Banchero has returned from injury. He just doesn't quite look himself. There are also some inherent flaws with the way that Orlando is built. in terms of the three-point shooting. Now they tried to address it with KCP, just hasn't worked out quite well. But we're going to try and double down on improving that area of this Orlando Magic basketball team. 15th overall, I have the Magic here selecting wing Knueppel from Duke, and I think this is a home run pick for Orlando. They need floor spacing, and they get arguably the best movement shooter in the entire draft, someone who has very good skills and tools to fit into an NBA offense in an off-ball role without being a horrible on-ball player. Now, he's not going to be having the ball in his hands a ton. He doesn't quite have the upside that Reed Sheppard had, where Reed Sheppard could also be an elite off-ball standstill catch-and-shoot guy, movement shooting threat, while also running 15 to 20 pick and rolls a game. That's an impressive type of prospect, which is why I had him so high on my board last year. For Orlando, you're not getting that kind of player, but you're getting a player who is not going to operate in the pick and roll a ton, but when he comes off of a screen, when he comes off of a floppy action, or you get him off of a flare, you get him off of some type of Spain look, and he's catching the ball and a closeout's running at him, he's got the on-ball skills to work out of those advantage situations, attack closeouts, get to the basket, make the extra pass off of a live dribble. He's not, again, a point guard. He's not going to ever be a point guard. He's not going to handle the ball a ton for your team, but I think he can be a guy who's very effective when teams are still trying to really run him off the three-point line. He's going to draw a lot of really hard closeouts, and I think he's got the skills and tools, shot making inside the arc, the passing inside the arc as well, to be a player that can really weaponize his shooting gravity, and that's what really excites me here for Orlando, 15th overall. Pick number 16 now, the Oklahoma City Thunder here. This pick comes from the Miami Heat, which was lottery protected, so 16th, one of the highest possible spots Oklahoma City can be picking with this selection. Remember, earlier we went with Khaman Maluach at pick number 9. The rich continue to get richer here. 16th overall, the Oklahoma City Thunder select wing Adou Thiero from Arkansas. One of the biggest problems that Oklahoma City's going to have just with their sheer volume of draft picks, which is very likely that they trade some of these picks at the trade deadline for future stuff, especially 2030 or 2031. I would not be shocked by that at all. What would not surprise me here is if Oklahoma City, if they do have these picks, if they draft guys who they think maybe need a little bit of development time. And Adou Thiero, he's had a huge breakout season for Arkansas. After his first 2 years with Coach Calipari at Kentucky, the move over from Lexington to Arkansas has really opened up opportunity and actual success. Now, the three-point shot volume's not good for his position. The three-point percentage is definitely not good for his position, and that's where some of the development needs to occur. For him to be an effective playoff player, for him to be an effective offensive player, he needs to be more than just a cutter. He needs to be more than just a transition advantage play finisher. He needs to be better offensively, and it really stems from just being a reliable catch-and-shoot guy. Teams are going to leave him open right now with how he currently slates to be in the NBA. Now, I still am very excited about Thiero. I think there's so many tools to work with. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of OG Anunoby from a physical strength, functional athleticism, playing off of 2 feet, off of jump stops, and being a cutter off the baseline, working out of the dunker spot. I think there's so much that Thiero can do for a team, which is why I think a smart team like OKC picks him up here 16th overall. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time for him to get to that area. I think the real cream of the crop here for Thiero, and the reason why you're drafting him in the first round, this guy's going to be able to guard. And again, it's not just the point of attack, put him on the basketball and have him try and navigate screens, which I think that is something he's going to be pretty good at. I think really where he's going to make a ton of money is gap help, event creation, disruption, something OKC already dominates the league with to begin with. They get a big, strong, physical, switchable type of player who has really good defensive off-ball instincts, and I think this kind of player here is an awesome selection for Oklahoma City. He finishes inside the arc extremely well, especially at the rim. The athletic tools really pop off, both offensively and defensively on film. And I think for the Thunder here, 16th overall, you're getting a super high impact player who, yes, he needs a little bit of time to grow, but he might be kind of Lou Dort mini in a lot of ways for his impact and the way that he can help your team win a lot of games. And that's something OKC is going to be doing over the next decade or so, winning a lot of games. Pick 17. Welcome the Minnesota Timberwolves to the first round mock draft. First time that they have been pictured here in a 2025 mock draft on Utility Sports. And that's because the Detroit Pistons have been winning a lot of games. If you're a Pistons fan watching this right now, first of all, you got to be hyped. Kate Cunningham's been awesome. The Pistons have been really good. And the Wolves are here to reap the benefits of that. After the Karl Anthony Towns trade, they have a pick to work with now. in this draft. And while the Wolves maybe could look to explore trading this pick in this mock draft, we're not doing trades. So 17th overall, I have the Timberwolves selecting forward Collin Murray-Boyles from South Carolina. I think one of the more polarizing, intriguing prospects in the draft. Some people right now, especially the analytics darlings, think that Collin Murray-Boyles might be worthy of a top 3, top 4 selection in this draft. I find myself a little hesitant on that. He's a 6'7", inside finishing, inside scoring forward. In the NBA, that's going to be kind of tricky to really solve. But, you know, the comps for Draymond Green are thrown around, and I understand that. There is some playmaking feel, and defensively, he does a lot of really nice things. The anticipation, the defensive rotation tools, the makeup recovery speed. He is honestly a pretty impressive defensive prospect and someone who I think is going to be able to find ways to win possessions for your team, make extra plays that impact winning. Again, impact, fit are always so important in the NBA draft, and I think Collin Murray-Boyles, while the fit here with Rudy Gobert might be a little bit weird, a player who I want to point to who actually had a good deal of success with Gobert outside of the playoffs was Kyle Anderson. And I think Kyle Anderson, even though he was a non-shooter essentially, every team treated him like a non-shooter, his playmaking, his IQ, his instincts, his finishing, and his defensive flexibility, being able to guard up and down the lineup a little bit, guarding mostly 2 through 4 for the Wolves a couple of years ago. Collin Murray-Boyles is a player who can maybe fit into that kind of archetype, that kind of skill set that provides positive additions for Minnesota long term. He's a talent grab here. This is arguably best player available. I think a lot of people would probably agree with that. I have him clearly going in this mock draft lower than a lot of other people have him. I do not work off of consensus at all. In fact, I try to mostly avoid what other people think and see in players because I just think it kind of skews my perspective too much, and I don't want anyone else's input. I want it to be my eyes telling me what to believe, whether that be through my own data analysis and research or through my overall just film study and watching the players play games. Obviously, I do so much of all of those things that I have a pretty good overall picture, I think, and my big boards historically have turned out pretty good. I have a miss here and there, one or two, I think, bad misses a year. Like Franz Wagner was the guy I was way too low on, as an example. This year, Jalen Wells was a player I was too low on in the 2024 draft. I don't have any problem being honest about that. And I'm learning from those mistakes. But Collin Murray-Boyles for me is a player I'm not quite as high on as others, but I understand a lot of the tools and traits, and I think there's a chance here that he could end up being a pretty unique, intriguing player in the NBA, although I think the Draymond Green comparison is pretty rich, honestly. Pick 18, the Houston Rockets now on the clock. This pick comes from the Phoenix Suns. The Rockets are going to be a very interesting trade team, probably in the offseason, maybe not so much at the trade deadline, but if you're a Rockets fan, come stop in anyway for the trade deadline. We'll talk all things Houston. They do have some expiring contracts that they could trade, so very, very, very interesting team nonetheless. 18th overall, I have the Houston Rockets selecting forward Alex Karaban. For a lot of this mock draft cycle, I have really loved Liam McNeeley, Alex Karaban's teammate at UConn, for the Houston Rockets when they were around pick 11, pick 12, pick 13. This mock draft, after the Suns have had a pretty decent last couple of weeks, now this pick finds itself at number 18, but Houston's still in a spot here where they can get a very talented player, and I think Alex Karaban is going to be probably the most overlooked player in the entire draft this year. The upside isn't immense. The raw talent isn't going to blow people away. You watch highlight reels, you're not going to say, oh my gosh, Alex Karaban, we have to draft this guy super high. I'm telling you right now, though, when you watch full games, when you see what this guy does, this is a winner. This is a player your team walks out of the NBA draft with in 2025. You should be grinning ear to ear. He is extremely smart. His IQ is off the charts. He commands the floor for UConn in a lot of ways. He organizes things. He sets things up. And if you have smart players, good things typically tend to happen. And I think for Houston specifically, ways to best add infrastructure around your young core with Amen Thompson, who is growing every single day into a better and better and better player with the real chance of becoming a superstar in the future. Alperen Şengün, who has his first ever All-Star appearance this year. Jalen Green, who has played like an All-Star for stretches of the season. This team is really young, and I think an infusion of more IQ, three-point shooting, and defensive talent fits everything that Ime Udoka and the Houston Rockets and Rafael Stone should want there for Houston. Karaban has a good, strong wingspan. He's impactful defensively. Think back to early in the season, he had a 7-block game. He's been an awesome player, and a player who impacts winning. UConn's won 2 national championships with him. I'm not even going to rule them out yet for a third one. We'll see how the tournament goes. Obviously, the odds are stacked against them for that. But I think Alex Karaban, such a winning player, such a good player. At times, the potential doesn't matter. Like, potential is this theoretical, figurative idea. It's not reality. And I'm telling you, the reality for Alex Karaban is really, really good. The floor is extremely high. And I think the potential is extremely underrated because when you have smart players again, good things tend to happen on the basketball court. Pick number 19, the Utah Jazz on the clock here now. This pick comes from the Minnesota Timberwolves, part of the Rudy Gobert trade, of course. And the Jazz, after going with Ace Bailey 3rd overall, now have 19 to work with. And I have them here at this spot selecting guard Nolan Traore from France. I think one of my big criticisms of the Jazz this season so far has been their defensive guard play and also their offensive guard play. The guard play has just been horrible. Isaiah Collier is a bad player, point blank, especially as a rookie. Now, he finished, I think, 29th on my big board in 2024. I was quite a bit lower than him on him than most other people. But I also did acknowledge the upside of him being an offensive initiator, creator, the passing, and the overall downhill force that he can play with at times. Those things are appealing. Nolan Traore kind of has a little bit of a different swagger to his game. Now, he hasn't had the best year for himself. Remember, coming into the draft cycle, we were talking about him as a potential top 3, top 4 pick, which is part of why he lands here with Danny Ainge and the Utah Jazz. Ainge has this way about him where he's going to draft upside. He's going to draft the players who had pedigree. He's going to draft the prospects who were rumored to be a top 3, top 5 pick a few years ago. He did that with Isaiah Collier at 29. I could see him coming back and doing it at 19. The Jazz are going to continue to take stabs at the guard spot until they find the guard of the future. And I think Traore has about as good a chance as anyone on that Jazz roster right now to be the point guard of the future. Again, I'm just not super optimistic on Isaiah Collier. You know, there has been room, there has been growth. Defensively, I'm very disappointed with what I've seen from him from both an effort and IQ standpoint. And he is a rookie. There's going to be improvements along the way, but Bryce Sensabaugh can't navigate a screen to save his life. The Jazz are bad right now, and that's okay because that's part of the idea here. They want to be bad. They want to get draft picks. They want to get talent, and they're doing that. But at some point, you have to start winning games down the road, and I think Nolan Traore can maybe be a long-term upgrade for them. And I think taking him at 19 is worth the long-term upside that could be present. Pick number 20, the Brooklyn Nets here now. This pick comes from the Milwaukee Bucks. They got this in part from the Mikal Bridges trade. And 20th overall, have the Nets selecting wing LeBaron Philon from Alabama. So for Brooklyn's second pick here in this mock draft, going with a wing player who, again, is a multifaceted, talented player. He's going to get looked at as a two-way piece, someone who can be an intuitive cutter, can work off of the basketball. Now, the three-point shot, I think there has been like some significant, meaningful growth throughout the course of the season. The three-point percentage doesn't necessarily justify or indicate that quite yet, but LeBaron Philon is an intriguing prospect, a player who I am very, very interested in seeing his development pathway because I think over time his game could continue and grow a lot. I feel like there's a lot of room for him to grow. If you're looking at it from a skill cap perspective, he's got, I think, pretty high caps from his athletic tools, the micro skills in terms of athleticism, coordination, point of balance. There's a lot of impressive things to work with, and he kind of just feels like a gamer in a way that he makes stuff happen. And for Alabama, you know, a player who I think's been overlooked a lot is Aden Holloway. Aden Holloway's had a really, really strong season. But again, this is a mock draft, not my big board. This is not what I would do. And I think LeBaron Philon, even though I do have some concerns about the three-point shot, especially just knowing how essential that is to survive and thrive in the postseason as a non-big man, I still think LeBaron Philon, there's a lot of tools and traits to work with here that makes him an intriguing prospect and one that I do see getting drafted in the first round in 2025. The Indiana Pacers here now at pick number 21. A lot of the cycle, I've been really looking at them adding guard play to increase their flexibility long term if a trade centered around Andrew Nembhard's contract opens up. However, I think just going BPA, best player available here for Indiana, might just make even more sense, and adding to their overall collection of assets and tools and good young players by just drafting well. And that's what Indiana typically does anyway. They have had pretty good track records of success through the NBA draft. And 21st overall here, I have the Indiana Pacers selecting forward Rasheer Fleming from St. Joseph's. This guy has been flying up boards. He's shooting over 40% from three as a true junior. Now, I think one of the biggest questions and one of the most essential questions for Rasheer Fleming this year, is the three-point shot real? Is the production real? Or is this a flash in the pan? Or is it just small sample size theater? And I think for Rasheer Fleming specifically, look at his freshman and sophomore year in college, the three-point shot was not connecting at a rate that would put first-round grade on his overall tape. This year, it is shooting over 40% from three. And I think an interesting comp for that, not in terms of play style, not in terms of the body type or frame or anything like that, but just from a statistical production standpoint, you look back at Hunter Salas last year, Wake Forest junior season, shot over 40% from three, chose to not come out for the NBA draft, returned back to Wake Forest. The beginning of this year, hadn't shot the ball very well. Now he's taking steps forward again. I still think Hunter Salas is an awesome college player. Is Rasheer Fleming's three-point success a flash in the pan, or is it legitimate? That's going to be one of the biggest questions for an NBA team. That's the point of individual workouts. That's the point of the NBA Combine. You get to see these players up close and personal for an entire week plus. You get to know everything that you want to possibly know about their game, and you get to take a super close look at their mechanics. And are they making a lot of shots in an open gym or not? And if they're not making a ton of shots, if they're not making 70% of their wide open shots in practice, I don't know what to tell you. I think that's kind of the big question here. Now, Fleming has awesome athletic tools. He's long, he's lengthy, he's athletic. He can be a transition force, a play finisher. And I think, obviously, Indiana has kind of their infrastructure in place when it comes to having Halliburton be your lead initiator, Pascal Siakam be a play finisher and creator for you, kind of that hybrid mix of both. Rasheer Fleming just needs to fit into the picture. And I think with the athletic tools, the traits, the physical gifts, and hopefully an emerging long-term three-point shot, he's an awesome kind of 3-and-D plus type of athlete for the Pacers to add here at pick 21. Pick 22, Oklahoma City back on the clock again. This pick comes from a swap with the LA Clippers through the Paul George trade. I feel like every single pick I have to detail some trade from 3 to 7 years ago that changed who had this pick. But nonetheless, Oklahoma City back on the clock again here, and I have them selecting forward/center Danny Wolf. And Thunder fans are probably shocked by some of these mock draft selections. Part of this stems from last year where they drafted Dylan Jones, a 6'4" kind of wing guard-ish type of player. They drafted AJ Mitchell, someone who I was extremely high on and I loved as a prospect. The Thunder, I think, are just loaded at guard moving forward with Shea, J-Dub, Cason Wallace, obviously AJ Mitchell, who I mentioned, Dylan Jones. I just don't see this team needing to look at a ton of guards. Isaiah Joe, I don't even know if I mentioned. The Thunder have guards. So, yes, I walked out with Khaman Maluach in this mock draft. Yes, we walked out with Adou Thiero. Danny Wolf is another big body, a 7-footer here who I misspoke in my last mock draft. I accidentally called him lefty. What I meant to say in that one was specifically that I think he has a preference driving to his left hand and at times can be reliant on that, especially coming off of ball screens. I think that's something that's worth monitoring. But if you're looking for kind of a poor man's version comparison for Danny Wolf, something like Domantas Sabonis Light is kind of in the picture. He's been a double-double machine for Michigan this year. He's been extremely productive. His efficiency and three-point volume have been very, very optimistic for a player of his size, shooting over 2 3-pointers a game and connecting on nearly 40% of them. I think the optimism around Danny Wolf as another true junior player, we had that with Adou Thiero, now a true junior here with Danny Wolf. This is a player who I think could be very fascinating long-term for Oklahoma City. Again, we're drafting a lot of size. The Thunder probably don't walk into this draft with 3 first-round picks. That's just the reality of it. So, Thunder fans are going to say we don't have the room for this. We don't have, and that's all valid. That's all very true. And I think that's why the Thunder will be active at the trade deadline. Come join me in the live stream. But Danny Wolf, I think, is such an awesome, intriguing player here. If you want to toggle into more dribble handoffs, if you want a player to fit next to Chet Holmgren, I think Danny Wolf can do that. His work with Vladislav Golden this year for Michigan has been awesome. The Wolverines have been able to dominate at times in Big Ten basketball with 2 7-footers, with 2 real big men who can play off of each other and create for each other. And I think this is kind of the model OKC's looking to instill around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, is having a player in Danny Wolf, having a player in Isaiah Hartenstein, having a player in Chet Holmgren, and maybe even Khaman Maluach if this mock draft comes to reality. They have so much size and skill and talent, touch, finishing around the hoop, playmaking. They just get a little bit of everything. And it's, again, because Oklahoma City's really smart. Sam Presti knows what he's doing. He drafts skill-oriented players. That's been, I think, one of the biggest shifts in his identity when it comes to a decision maker and drafter. kind of pivoting from athleticism and tools and pedigree to skills and raw talent. And it's okay if the guy doesn't have a 42-inch vertical. He's good at basketball, and Danny Wolf is very good at basketball. Pick number 23, the Atlanta Hawks here now via the Los Angeles Lakers. Of course, the Lakers walking out with Luka Doncic already look like one of the big trade deadline winners. The Atlanta Hawks here now, though, with a first-round pick, the second one in this mock draft. Remember, they had pick number 13, where they drafted Jeremiah Fears. I have the Hawks here going with guard Ben Saraf from Ulm. And I think for Saraf specifically, part of his fit and allure in Atlanta would be maybe a long-term Bogdan Bogdanovic replacement. There's been heavy reports and rumors about Bogdanovic being potentially available from Atlanta. Of course, Clint Capella might be on the move as well. I did strongly consider a couple of big men for the Hawks, but ultimately at pick 23, I decided to go with another perimeter-oriented player. Again, one of the big questions for Ben Saraf is the three-point shooting. How consistent, how reliable of a three-point shooter can he be? But there's so many tools. He's got very good quick burst with the ball in his hands. He weaponizes the weak side of the floor really, really well. One of the probably top 3 or 4 or 5 passers in this draft right now when it comes to passing the basketball. Now, he is somewhat left-hand dominant. He prefers driving to his left hand. He goes to his left hand a ton. He is a naturally left-handed player. So I think with that in mind, like, it does make some things questionable about like his ceiling in the NBA. If he's a heavy left-handed player, like teams are going to force him to his right hard. Now he does have a step back going to his right that I think can be kind of a little bit of a lifeline for him. He also has a pretty good quick right to left crossover, so he can kind of sell you going right, get you to kind of flip your hips and turn, and then try and attack back to his left hand. I think that kind of information, that kind of detail in scouting is super important, because if you're looking at a guy who is pretty left-hand dominant, like I think a comparison historically is maybe Jason Terry, someone who is very right-hand dominant, often would shoot only going to his right hand. Teams would try and force him to his left, but he would still manage to find ways to get to his right hand, whether that be navigating off of a screen offensively or setting up your defender like you're going to go left. And then I think with Saraf having that step back, which has become more and more and more and more and more of a mainstream shot in NBA basketball, Saraf's the type of skill set that I think Atlanta should take the bet on here at 23. You're spreading your wings out wide, trying to find players who can be complementary long-term pieces next to Trae Young. And I think Saraf at 23 is an awesome talent grab for Atlanta at this spot in the draft. Pick 24, Orlando, back on the clock again. So 24th overall, I have the Orlando Magic here selecting guard Jace Richardson from Michigan State, son of former NBA star Jason Richardson. Jace Richardson has been absolutely awesome for the Spartans as a freshman. His BPM is through the roof. The two-way impact is incredible. The three-point efficiency, especially shooting over 40% from three this season for the Spartans. Now, there are some actual concerns. His overall three-point volume isn't huge, taking just slightly over 2 3-point attempts per game. If you compare that to other prospects we've seen drafted in this mock draft, whether that be Jeremiah Fears or Knueppel, for example, his new soon-to-be teammate in Orlando based on this mock draft, the volume isn't huge there. It's not elite. And I think for Orlando specifically, a team that typically hasn't prioritized three-point shooting to the highest degree, Jace Richardson, I think, can be an awesome fit in the NBA for his variety of tools as a cutter. And he's not this clean, super easy fit onto every roster because he's not a predominant on-ball, high-volume usage player. And that might raise some concerns for people. But what I definitely can tell you is the impact's there. The winning kind of factor is in his DNA as a player, making plays on both sides of the basketball that impact possessions, impact winning performances for Michigan State specifically. And I think for Orlando, when you have a team that's already going to probably rely on Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Jalen Suggs for a majority of your offensive creation and ball handling, a player like Jace Richardson, even though he's not huge, doesn't have this awesome positional size to offer, he's going to be able to guard guards for you defensively, and he's going to be able to fit off of those bigger playmakers, off of the guys like Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero already in-house there for Orlando. I think specifically for the Magic, I don't expect them to make any huge NBA trades at the trade deadline here. Now, maybe I could be wrong. Knock on wood, maybe. We'll see what happens. But Jace Richardson, with this pick here at number 24, I think with Knueppel already addressing the shooting need, now you get a different kind of player who's also still a pretty effective shooter when he does shoot them. Jace Richardson, I think, fits pretty well here into Orlando in their long-term plans, next to Banchero and Wagner. Remember, if you guys are enjoying, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. And here we are now with pick number 25. The Memphis Grizzlies here now at this spot in the mock draft. First of all, Memphis, I think, might be loaded up to make some huge trade. This pick might be on the move at the deadline. We'll see what happens. If I was the Grizzlies with their luxury tax situation this year and next year, they have the wiggle room, they have the contracts to make something big happen and improve their starting lineup. Cough, cough, Cam Johnson. Nonetheless, here, the Grizzlies 25th overall, I have them selecting center Flory Bidunga from Kansas. This is a per-minute monster in college basketball. He's been highly, highly productive, specifically defensively as a rim protector. His blocks per game right now averaging over 1.5 blocks per game while just playing 16 minutes a night, and he's behind Hunter Dickinson. You think about the logjam there for the Jayhawks at the center spot. It hasn't been a problem, though, for Kansas. I think when Bidunga's in, he's giving 100% energy, 100% effort. I think if you're looking at his potential long-term fit in Memphis with the collection of size and athleticism and defensive acumen they already have, Bidunga could play in a similar kind of role. Low minutes, per minute monster in the NBA as well, where he goes out there and says, hey, if you commit 2-3 fouls, that's okay. Keep trying to block shots. Keep trying to impact the game at the defensive end of the floor. Get on the offensive glass. Be an impactful contributor. He's not going to average 15 to 20 points per game in the NBA, and that's okay. Memphis doesn't need him to do that. Memphis, a big part of their team DNA over the last 5 to 10 years has been winning possessions, getting second chance opportunities, protecting the rim. Obviously, Jaren Jackson Jr. does that at a high level. Zach Edey's got elite size and length as well. Yeah, mix in Flory Bidunga next to Santi Aldama. We'll see if they're able to keep him long-term with the contract situation coming up here in the near future. And then also Brandon Clark. I mean, the Grizzlies just always have a good collection of size. They always value size and overall rebounding and shot blocking around their team identity. And I think Flory Bidunga here, a player who should be getting first-round consideration. We'll see if he actually decides to come out this year for the NBA draft or not. But if he does, he will get some real buzz in the first round at some point in time. Pick 26, the Brooklyn Nets here now on the clock. This pick comes from, of course, the Mikal Bridges trade. 26th overall, I have the Brooklyn Nets taking guard Ian Jackson. So we're looking for some upside picks. Ian Jackson, another player who's shooting the ball really, really well, has kind of adapted to more of an on-ball role as the season has kind of progressed a bit for UNC. He's gained more confidence, gotten a little bit more comfortable at the college level after kind of maybe a little bit of a slower start. Not a bad start necessarily, but just a little bit of a slower start to the season. And for Brooklyn again here, I think given the fact that they have max cap space to work with this offseason, they could be pushing some of these chips in for a huge trade for a star level player. Not sure if that will ever materialize or not. But overall, Brooklyn's at a spot where they're looking for draftable, developable pieces. Talked about it with pick number 7 with Derek Queen. Talked about it with a variety of their other picks as well. Ian Jackson's another guy who can be a developable piece for them long-term, a guy who maybe doesn't fit or slot into an easy, obvious position or role, but that means he's not pigeonholed at this point in time. You can draft him, try and guide him, and he could be a player who I think specifically working off of some of those handoffs we referenced earlier with his athletic tools and the overall efficiency profile we've seen this year at UNC for the Tar Heels. I think Ian Jackson could be a long-term, really intriguing upside get for the Nets at 26. 27, we're going to stay on the topic of the Brooklyn Nets here now. This pick comes from the Houston Rockets. Of course, they have the least favorable in this instance, so they have the Rockets pick at number 27. And with this pick, they take wing Hugo Gonzalez, another developmental project here for Brooklyn. Hugo Gonzalez at the beginning of the year was not getting significant run over in Spain. As the year has progressed, as the season's gone on, the playing time, his tick has gone up. He's been getting a little bit more run, and I think he's been productive in those minutes. This is, again, a dribble, pass, shoot tools player. For his size, for his length, if you go back to a lot of his FIBA tape, his U18, U19 tape, he's a player who I think is going to be a guy who, with the athletic tools, if he progresses his body a little bit, gets a little bit stronger, adds in some core muscle especially, the playmaking feels there for his size. This is kind of your skilled point forward type of player long term. Now he's not going to be like Luka Doncic or LeBron James point forward. I'm thinking more like lower level Nick Batum in a lot of ways, but that's a good player. That's a player who can be a really productive fit onto a roster. especially offensively, where a lot of Hugo Gonzalez's dribble pass shoot skill set stands out. And I think for Brooklyn, again, specifically, playing out of advantage, playing out of DHOs, playing out of speed, pace, quickness. Part of what made Dennis Schroeder and Dorian Finney-Smith so successful early in the season with Brooklyn before they both got traded. They have the infrastructure and the scheme and the setup here to excel and to help their young players develop and produce. And those two things are not the same, but we often talk about them hand in hand. And I think Brooklyn's going to be a team that's going to be able to produce and develop talent over the next couple of years with Jordi Fernandez as their head coach. Pick number 28, the Boston Celtics here now. Team obviously so heavily built on three-point shooting. They're going to take a player here who hasn't been shooting the three ball extremely well in Andre Stojakovic from Cal, but there's a little bit of pedigree here, and a lot of the shooting indicators really suggest he's going to be a very good shooter in the NBA once he kind of adjusts to role and kind of gets his shot diet into a spot where you see NBA role players' shot diet kind of thrive and succeed most often. Of course, son of NBA great Peja Stojakovic. So first of all, the shooting profile, you would have to assume Andre Stojakovic is going to turn into a good shooter. And I've also watched him in workouts. I've seen him go 20 of 20 from the corner in warm-ups in practice. Now, again, it's practice, it's warm-up. It's not the same thing as a game, and the production hasn't quite been there from the three-point shot, but he's shooting over 80% from the line for Cal. He's really filled into that Jalen Tyson role, something I had predicted and talked about before the season even started in college basketball, saying Andre Stojakovic might be one of the biggest risers this year because of the opportunity he's going to have after transferring from Stanford over to Cal and kind of assuming that forward role of coming off of curls and taking DHOs and getting to certain spots on the floor and kind of leveraging his skill set and athleticism as a scorer. Now in the NBA, he's not going to always be afforded that opportunity. We've even seen that same exact thing with Jalen Tyson this year with Cleveland. But I think for Stojakovic specifically, the Celtics are a team that last year they drafted Baylor Shireman, someone with on-ball skills and tools, while also just being a flat-out good three-point shooter. He hasn't had a huge role either yet, but I think the Celtics are going to focus on replenishing their depth assets and specifically players with multifaceted skills where they're going to be able to catch and shoot, catch and attack closeouts. I think Stojakovic and Shireman are both players who can do that, and I think walking away with Andre Stojakovic here, 28th overall, not only is he solid positionally sized, he's got good NBA pedigree. He's going to adjust to the NBA pretty well because of that. NBA, sons of NBA players typically do adjust to the NBA better than your typical 18, 19, 20-year-olds anyway. And I think Stojakovic is a guy who I would bet on long-term, especially if I was the Boston Celtics. Pick number 29, the LA Clippers here now. This pick, of course, part of that swap with the OKC Thunder. And here I have the Los Angeles Clippers selecting forward Thomas Sorber from Georgetown. Now, if I was running the draft here for LA, I would probably walk away with Mark Sears because I'd be really happy with just picking up a guy who I know is good at basketball. And Sorber's been good at basketball this year for Georgetown. Now, there are some questions. I talked about the positive shooting indicators for Andre Stojakovic. Sorber has some of those as well, but he's nowhere near as productive as a three-point shooter in the college game, only shooting 17% from three. Stojakovic is a little bit above 30%. While Sorber is a true freshman, maybe you can give a little bit of leeway to that. There's adjustment periods, right? There are the positive shooting indicators really stem from his mid-range game. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of a lesser version of DeAndre Hunter from what we saw at Virginia. And Sorber as a true freshman playing for Georgetown, you're not going to get that DeAndre Hunter Virginia kind of play that experienced the success he found there for the Cavaliers. But what you're going to hopefully get from Sorber is some form of development as a play off the catch, stretch out to the three-point line a little bit better in the NBA type of player. Now, the Clippers, their first-round draft success over the last few years has not been pretty. You think Daniel Oturu, you think about Fiondu Kabengele, you think about Kobe Brown. It hasn't been pretty. There's also been misses in the early second round with Jason Preston. It just hasn't panned out very well for the Clippers. Their biggest draft success, honestly, over the last few years, realistically, has been, Jordan Miller in a way, and then, of course, Terrence Mann. And, it's been kind of rough. The Clippers just have not drafted well in the last 5 to 7 years. It's just point blank what it is. And Sorber, I would have concerns about the three-point shot, but I could see the vision here, at least with him being a bigger body, strong, athletic, gets on the glass. I think that's one of his best calling cards is he's been really productive as a freshman, and a lot of that stems from not only scoring the ball, but also impacting the game in multiple different ways, especially getting on the defensive glass and kind of closing out defensive possessions for a team like he's done for the Hoyas this year. Pick number 30, the Phoenix Suns welcome to the first round as well. So not only Minnesota new to this mock draft, but Phoenix is as well. Now I have a slight indication that this pick might be on the move. Not sure if Phoenix is going to actually keep this pick or not. Last year they nailed it out of the park though with both Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro. So if you're a Suns fan, you should be maybe hoping you guys keep this pick. But nonetheless, 30th overall, this pick comes from the Cavaliers through the Jazz, part of that swap where they got 3 first-round picks for the 2031 first. I thought a very good trade for Utah. But nonetheless, Phoenix here on the clock. I have them selecting wing Dink Pate from the G League. Of course, spent some time with the G League Ignite, now part of the Mexico City Capitanes. And his game really is predicated on mid-range pull-ups, playing with the ball in his hands, a little bit of facilitation promise for him moving forward. It's a tricky situation here. I don't think Phoenix is a tremendous fit for Dink Pate, but we'll see what happens with Tyus Jones in the market. I think just another guy who can initiate a little bit of offense while also have some scoring touch to him. This might just be a long-term potential pickup for Phoenix. Like, while everything kind of points to them wanting to be all in right now, I wonder at some point if the organization starts to question that philosophy, if the organization starts to look at themselves and say, well, we got swept in the first round in the 2024 playoffs by Minnesota. We'll see how the 2025 playoffs go. If the Suns even make it or not, we'll see. But with how things are kind of slating right now, at some point in time, there might be a pivot point for Phoenix. And I think Dink Pate, if the Suns do reach that kind of mountaintop and say, look, we're not good enough to win a title, we got to figure something out, taking an upside pick like Dink Pate might help bridge to the future post Kevin Durant, maybe post Devin Booker, and I'm not sure if a post-Bradley Beal will ever come to fruition or not. We'll see with that no-trade clause, but I think Phoenix is in a spot here where they're kind of in jeopardy long-term. Their asset pool is very, very limited, and Kevin Durant's not getting any younger. Devin Booker is not going to sit around and spend his entire prime on a losing team or a team that doesn't advance in the postseason. So we'll see what happens, but I think the Suns are maybe in a little bit of a worry mode. Going forward, we'll see if they actually reach that mountaintop or not this year. I really hope you guys did enjoy. Make sure to go check out that trade deadline live stream right now, probably live on the channel at the time you're watching this. If it's before the NBA trade deadline, I'm probably live. So come stop in, say hello, let me know your favorite team. I want to know everything that you want to know about the NBA trade deadline. I've got so much time and preparation into this that I'm so extremely excited. Again, thank you all so much for watching. If you did enjoy, leave a like. Subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.